On December 22, 2000, a company that controlled over 50% of the global outboard market filed for bankruptcy. 7,000 people lost their jobs that day. The engine that caused it was sitting in showrooms 6 months earlier with a manufacturer's warranty. This is the story of how that happened and why the outboard on your transom is a direct result of it. To understand what Mercury was, you have to understand Carl Kiekhaefer. The man who founded Mercury in 1939 was an engineer who got fired from Evinrude after 3 months for arguing with his bosses about engine design. He bought a bankrupt outboard company in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, rebuilt 300 defective motors, and sold them to Montgomery Ward. By the late 1950s, Kiekhaefer had built a secret test facility on a 1,400-acre lake in central Florida that he called Lake X. He ran 2 boats non-stop for 25,000 miles on Lake X to prove his engines could circle the globe, refueling and swapping drivers while the boats were still moving. He called it Operation Atlas. That was the Mercury way. Horsepower, spectacle, and proving that your engine was tougher than whatever the other guy built. Mercury dominated American racing, set speed records, and sold outboards on the back of brute performance. And for decades, that approach worked. Mercury and OMC, with Johnson and Evinrude, split roughly 60% of the global outboard market between them. American companies built big, powerful 2-stroke engines, and the rest of the world bought them. But while Mercury was chasing speed records in the Florida swamp, a company on the other side of the Pacific was solving a completely different problem. Yamaha Motor spun off from the musical instrument company in 1955 and built its first outboard, the P7, in 1960. 2 engineers developed it. Customers told Yamaha the P7 was loud and rough, so Yamaha went back and built a quieter one. That habit of listening and adjusting stuck. Where Mercury tested engines by running them until something broke and then fixing it, Yamaha tested engines by running them and then tearing them apart afterward to study the wear patterns, even when nothing had failed. By the 1970s, Yamaha was building Enduro Series outboards for commercial use in developing countries. Engines designed for fishermen who ran them all day, every day, in saltwater with minimal access to parts or mechanics. Yamaha built them to survive conditions that would destroy a showroom engine in a season. Every Yamaha outboard to this day goes through a full-throttle test run in a water tank before it ships. After those test runs, Yamaha pulls a percentage of completed engines off the line, tears them completely apart, and inspects every component for wear. They rebuild those engines and ship them, but the teardown data goes back into the manufacturing process. The factory gets a little better every month, every year, compounding over decades. That is why Yamaha engines in the 1990s were logging thousands of hours on nothing more than oil changes, particularly in commercial applications, while American outboards were still being sold on horsepower alone. And then, in 1996, the US government forced every outboard manufacturer to make a choice that would destroy one of them. In October 1996, the EPA published its first emissions regulations for gasoline marine engines. The rule demanded a 75% reduction in hydrocarbon emissions over a 9-year phase-in period. For the traditional 2-stroke outboard, which mixed oil and gasoline and burned them together, this was a death sentence. The cost was estimated at $40 to $60 million per company to develop compliant technology. Yamaha had been building 4-stroke outboards since 1984. They had over a decade of development behind a technology that was inherently cleaner and easier to make compliant. When the EPA mandate hit, Yamaha already had working four-stroke models in production. Neither Mercury nor OMC had a single four-stroke in their lineup. Mercury adapted. They partnered with an Australian company called Orbital to develop direct fuel injection for their two-strokes, eventually producing the Optimax line. It worked. Mercury survived, but OMC wasn't that lucky. If this kind of industry history is changing how you think about the outboard on your boat, hit subscribe right now, because what happened next is the part nobody in the marine industry talks about openly. Outboard Marine Corporation was the other giant. Johnson and Evinrude, both under the OMC umbrella, held about a third of the global outboard market and owned 13 boat manufacturing companies. Rather than invest in four-stroke development, OMC decided to save its existing two-stroke platform by adopting a direct injection system from a German firm called FICHT. During internal testing, the FICHT engines had high failure rates. The prototypes struggled with the high-pressure injection system, and the transition between trolling speed and higher RPMs caused chronic problems. OMC pushed the engines into production anyway. In 2000, OMC invited 21 marine journalists to Hilton Head Island for a press event to showcase the new FICHT-powered Evinrude outboards. According to Captain Bill Jennings, one of those writers, the event was a disaster. Engines failed. The technology that was supposed to save the company instead demonstrated its weakness in front of the people who would write about it. In the field, the problems were worse. Pistons and connecting rods blew through the sides of engine blocks. Oil injection systems delivered inconsistent amounts of fuel, causing engines to seize. Owners were stranded on the water. The 200 and 225 horsepower models were eventually recalled for fuel leaks that posed fire and explosion risks. Bombardier, which later acquired the brands, had to absorb the recall costs. On December 22, 2000, OMC filed for bankruptcy. 7,000 employees lost their jobs. A company that had controlled over 50% of the global outboard market in the 1960s was gone. The Johnson and Evinrude brands were sold to Bombardier, which eventually discontinued Evinrude production entirely in 2020. Mercury survived by adapting faster than OMC and eventually becoming the dominant American outboard manufacturer. Today, Mercury builds everything from 2.5 horsepower portables to a 600 horsepower V12, and they are the only outboard manufacturer in the world with a V12. Their smaller motors, the 30 horsepower and below, are built by Tohatsu in Japan. Yamaha is the world's largest outboard manufacturer by volume. The company that started with 2 engineers and a loud prototype in 1960 now ships engines to every continent. Their factories still pull finished engines off the line, tear them down, and study the wear. Kiekhaefer got fired from Evinrude for arguing about engine design and went on to build the most powerful outboard company in America. Yamaha listened when customers said their first motor was too loud and quietly spent the next 30 years getting better at the boring stuff, the tolerances, the teardowns, the incremental fixes nobody notices until the engine hits 5,000 hours. When the EPA rewrote the rules in 1996, the company that had spent decades preparing for a test it did not know was coming passed it without breaking a sweat. The company that had spent decades winning races could not retool fast enough. The Yamaha longevity numbers in this video come primarily from commercial Enduro Series engines built for severe daily use. Consumer models vary depending on maintenance and operating conditions. And Mercury today is a fundamentally different company from the one that fought Japanese imports in the 1990s. Their current engineering is world-class by any measure. What this history shows is not which brand to buy. It shows why the philosophy behind how an engine is designed and tested matters more than the badge on the cowling. Now you know why your engine exists and where it came from. But knowing the history does not protect the engine you already own. There are 10 maintenance tricks that cost under $700 combined, but prevent over $22,000 in dealership repairs. And the marine industry is counting on you never learning them. That video is on your screen right now. Click it.